Right, we're streaming. Everyone's live.
Are you on GTL?
Hmm?
Which
I believe it's going to be on GTL. We'll see though.
Yes.
Huh? Yes.
You're on.
Hello, internet. So yes, that. Well, I'm using this mic actually.
So that one's connected to the game?
Yes, yes. So they're just getting the display. I don't think they're getting. Yeah. So hello, Bergen. Ooh, I'm sure they're there. It might not be, but just in case they are. Okay, so today I wanted to talk about asynchronous programming. Okay, hands up who's done concurrent programming, which is multi-threading basically. Good, some. This is not multi-threading. This is asynchronous programming, it's not the same. Who here has used events at all, or messaging systems? Who here has used events, or in C#? Who doesn't know what an event is? Good. Okay. Asynchronous program is very much related to handling data streams, like input streams, event streams. So UI knowledge is useful. We haven't really gone over that too much. Who here doesn't know how to use Unity's UI? And that's fine. Can everyone get it to resize correctly?
What do you mean by correctly?
Like if you grab the screen and resize it, does everything go blah? It used to. Okay. So let's just create a quick new project. Call it async. So while that's starting, let's try and do this asynchronously. So what is synchronicity? The best way I could think about was going to sushi restaurants. So I prefer the sushi restaurants where you have the conveyor belt going around and you can get served basically as soon as you sit down. It kind of sucks when you have to queue and then you have to wait your turn to get served. So that's like the difference between a sequential system and an asynchronous system. But the problem area of when you're dealing with code and events and inputs that can come out of sequence, they can happen any time, they might fail. That adds a lot of complexity to the program. It's difficult to predict. And we have to manage this some way. One particular problem that we have is when we're game testing, for instance. So we have a number of things happening, and then the player walks into the simulation and there's some random element, and then all these events are proccing and these messages are getting sent around. And if you give all these event tools to designers, they're not really thinking about, well, if that happens and that triggers that and that triggers that, I better hope that that thing that triggers later down the tree doesn't trigger something which triggered the thing in the first place, because then that could cause a circular dependency. And it turns out as the game scales up, that happens all the time, and those are really nasty bugs because you don't really repeat them, because when you're testing a game, you tend to play it in a certain way. So you're a really bad bug tester, and you give your program to someone else and they play it completely differently, and then lo and behold, it doesn't work. So we want to try and manage this complexity and make sure that the program behaves in predictable ways. So that's a bit of a paradigm shift, which is the appropriate word. Because normally we're working in a very imperative way. We're working in terms of statements. So you go into a function, run line 1, line 2, line 3, all the way until the code block finishes, and then you return. But in a asynchronous language, the code is going away doing something, and then it can kind of continue on with its work on the main thread while that task is going away doing something else. And that leads to people shifting to a more declarative language, which is more based on expressions and declarations of this is the way it flows. And here we're getting into the domain of functional programming, which is a little bit beyond the scope of one lecture. So that's not something we can really cover, and it's not really relevant to game programming, but it is a very cool and other discipline that sort of builds off these principles. I'd go as far as to say that the people who have built these libraries that we're going to go through today were inspired by functional programming, so it's worth looking into. So I'm just quickly going to go over terminology in case some people aren't familiar with it. So in Unity, you've hopefully been using coroutines. Hands up for coroutines. Yeah. They're pretty good. I mean, they're better than no coroutines. I would take them. But I have criticized them a little bit in the Discord because they do have problems. Time slicing as well is something that you're probably doing if you're not using coroutines, and that's just when you have like a timer, and the timer runs after 15 frames or 0.6 seconds. So you need some kind of a counter to count how many frames or how much time has gone by, and then you execute the code. You can think of a coroutine a bit like that, except the coroutine can yield part of the way through its execution to the main thread, and then something else will process, and then it will come back to the coroutine later when it's its turn. So I think this has changed recently because Unity has upgraded their .NET and C# version, so you can use 4, whereas before we were stuck on 2. So on 2, your asynchronous functions, they returned an IEnumerator, which you could just iterate through, and they had yield statements inside, whereas now in C# 4 you can actually prefix it with async rather than IEnumerator. That allows you to use like the C# task syntax, which comes in a later version. I also want to go through the link query language. It's link language integrated query, because that allows you to sort items through expressions, and it's useful for retrieving things from a database or sorting things in a UI, for instance. Has anyone used a link here? Good. One person. The task system is, you can think of it as a wrapper for a coroutine. That uses the await async keywords that I was mentioning. And basically you can start it at any time, it runs, it's got a cancellation token so you can abort it, it can also fail, and then when it returns you can continue. In that way it's kind of similar to threads, which unlike tasks and coroutines don't run on the main thread. They can run on whatever threads are available and whatever core is available. Unity is kind of single-threaded most of the time, but they are working on a job system, which is kind of like threads and tasks. So coroutines. So I've got Unity coroutines on the left and Python coroutines on the right. Lots of languages have coroutines, so Unity's is just one specific implementation. So coroutines are pretty useful if you want to run something periodically that's expensive. So for instance here they're doing a proximity check that runs forever. So that's basically a while true that practice for loop. And then after the proximity check it waits a tenth of a second and then runs it again. So yes, here it can finding the distance. So it's probably doing square root calculations of why they've done that check. It's a pretty pointless check though, because he's not really returning anything, it's just a pointless proximity check. But we'll just ignore that. I assume that what he meant to do there was just to say like, oh, we're going to do a proximity check and then something's going to happen, like the enemy's going to engage you or the enemy's going to disable. Python coroutines, they have a concept which we'll go over, which is futures. So I think the easiest way to think about this is when the client is fetching something remotely, that's a task that's going to return in the future. So it's going to return with a state HTTP code saying yes, that's okay, here's the data, or no, you're not getting a response. And what they do is they have this nice little array operator from yield. So once both of these futures have completed, then you get the responses and then return the responses. So it's a tidy way of handling it. I have some criticism of Unity coroutines. Tidiness is one of them. Has anyone encountered some other things about Unity coroutines that aren't great? No?
I haven't used it that much.
Anyone?
Editor support. I have coroutines and everything.
Yeah, I've forgotten about that, but yes, that was the bane. That was annoying. I had to make my own editor coroutine. I've got that sitting around, so maybe it's something to fish out. Yes, there's one thing, is they require users to be running. You can't run it in their script. You also require a game object to operate on, so something has to be instantiated to get it done. When you're doing a yield, you can't put that within like a try catch, for instance, so you can't capture exceptions. So it means you have to handle the error somehow there. You also can't use out parameters, so you can't get a value like I want this function to go away and get this value and then set it for you. So no, it doesn't work. You can't return values from it. So basically the only way to do it is what you do is you get a callback function that you pass to the coroutine, and then the coroutine will kind of go, I finished my task, here is the data, run that callback. And then somehow inside your IEnumerator, you have to communicate via parameter in that callback that gets set, and wait for that to be saying like, I've got a response now. And that's annoying. So all yield is doing is waiting. It's not receiving any parameters or anything. So that's a bit of a bit dirty, basically, and that's quite neat. Quick look at the task syntax that's available in Unity now. So rather than saying yield, saying await, basically the same thing, and rather IEnumerate and casing. A lot of these APIs have these methods that basically fix the problem that Unity coroutines have. So here we have, I want to continue with on this thread with another task. So it's a way to like chain your coroutines. Other expressionate forms, it's the link query language. I personally think link is great. It's really good, especially with databases when you're querying lists and you want to sort things. It does have its problems, but these problems by no means are deal breakers. I mean, there's people used to say, don't use link on iOS because iOS wants everything to be compiled ahead of time. They don't want to compile it runtime because yes.
Does the C# containers use link, for example, file or? Where do you?
I think that you have to include the link namespace,
Okay.
and then most of the link methods have extensions for the collections. So like your lists, your dictionaries, these are all collections. And so then those link methods will become available to you in the IntelliSense dropdown. So yes, I mean, all these functions work fine, except the mix on iOS. They do allocate though. So, for instance, like they'll return a new list quite often, and then that will mean that there's a new allocation. So you can get a lot of garbage. In a lot of operating environments, garbage isn't a big problem, but you can get into some occasions where the memory isn't getting freed up, it's getting fragmented, and stuff like that. But that's beyond this, something interesting, but not really relevant. So a lot of the link methods we're going to go through today use the C# template functions. So who's actually used func, predicate, action? Okay. Who's used specifically func, which means it's the templated function? One person again. So func basically, it takes the parameters. So like you've got one parameter, got some overload, taking two, taking three parameters, and it always returns a result. So let's take a look at that. I'm gonna create a canvas. Image. Okay. So now I'm going to make this image full screen by pressing Control Shift and selecting the Auto Expand Anchor Pivot. This might be useful to people who haven't done it. That means that's fully stretched, but in order to keep the previous shape, it's changed these parameters here. So if I now select them, get rid of the offsets, it's going to fill the screen. And let's just make that the background image. Then I'm going to make a container object. Yes, the default anchor preset is it just sits in the middle, so like that. And you can make it very wide, but that's an absolute size. So if you try and scale this, it's like, yeah, well, I'm not going to scale, am I? But if I do, say I want this to scale this way. I want to have a border of 20 at the top and 20 at the bottom. So here it's scaling vertically, but not horizontally. And if I change my pivot to this, it's going to scale horizontally and not vertically. So, everyone knew that, yeah? No? So you didn't know the UI, okay. Okay, so let's set this to be 150. Okay. So now this is going to be my menu. And then within this container, I'm going to have, let's make this an image. And let's make this a vertical layout group. And I want the child alignment to be middle center. and I want a spacing of, let's say, 20. And then this is my image. Well, let's just call it an item rather than image. Let's say this is our item. Let's create a script. Is anyone doing any inventory systems or anything like that in their games? Oh, then you might be interested in this. So here, yes, let's just say this grey box is an item, and then this white container is the list. So this could be like a quest list, this could be a vertical list of items in your inventory. And because I've got this vertical layout group here, Unity is going to position these items automatically for me. So if I duplicate, Unity does this. The issue is it doesn't scale, so we would want to make this like a scrollable area, and then it would auto size and show only the relevant ones. Let's just say we have these items here, and now we want to kind of like sort them and find some specific details. Let's create a list first. Item bag. One little trick that you can do in Unity is if you implement the reset callback, then what you can do is run this via the little cogwheel option. So that can be useful, say, if you want to reset the parameters. So let's create a list of items. What did I call them? Item. Serialize my list. And then let's get components in children. This doesn't like me for some reason. So I'll be done shortly. Wee bit of patience. So, like, what parameters do we want to sort by with our item? What sort of relevant fields do you think?
ID.
ID. Let's just go with a string. What else? Unity UI elements. Or is it a sprite that I'm looking for? But we want something to sort by, so how about we create an enum? Let's just assume that this is like something that you pick up. Item type. Give me some game item types, guys.
Weapons.
Weapons.
Armor.
Armor. This is like very male-orientated things.
Consumables.
Consumer. Fast cars. About potion, pet. Right. I've already told you all the story about when we were making an RPG, it made all the kids upset. So we decided to basically remove the combat. So now they're like, the animals are just angry because they've been corrupted by this outer evil force, and you just have to make them better. Because I just assumed that kids wanted to fight things, and turns out that they don't. So something has happened to you when you were young that taught you to kill and destroy and consume. Maybe it's video games. I don't know. It's a vicious circle. Interesting experiment. Okay. So get components item. So this cannot implicitly. Okay, so cool. So this is an interesting thing. So the get components in children, this returns an array, and I want it to be a list. And I was like, oh, if only there was like a helpful extension method that could help me here. What's this? Da da da. This isn't actually what I was going to show you with Link, but Link's great. I like Link. It has a lot of these helpful extension methods. So. Added bonus. Alright, okay, so we have our IDs. Let's just say this item is, it's the sword of truth. Yes, but we don't have much space, we'll just say truth. And this one is armor, British armor, because it's got the U in. Technically that's from France, but you know. Let's call this the best plate. And then this one is potion. Let's say this one is health, and then this one is greater health. That was sword of truth. Okay, so currently they're not set, but since I've implemented the reset callback, that will be called when I set this, and there we have our items. Handy. And I'll just create a save the scene file. Okay. So let's say I want to create another list, which is potion items. So here I have my items, and I want my potion items. So we want to quickly like sort out the potions that we don't want. Well, we want to sort the potions that we do want, and the rest we want to sort out. Sorry. So normally we would just go through a for loop, right, or a while loop, or a do while loop, just to kind of loop through every single item and then pick it out. But we're lazy. We don't want to do that. We want an easier way. So now we've included the system link, we have a lot of handy methods. So here's a link method. So here we have like this is the where item, and it returns, it takes a func. So let's talk about func because that's where we left off. So I'm just going to create my predicate func. And the caller is potion item, and then this is going to take an item, and we're going to say return true if item looks foolish. I'm going to be awkward. Okay, so here I have my item type. We've just received pizza. So lecture is cancelled. Sorry, Bo. And he leaves. Thank you, that man. Okay, so here I'm evaluating whether the item is the item type of potion, and I return true if it is. So this this where method basically just wants me to have a function that takes an item and then returns true or false. But it's going to return an enumerable, which is not what this is. This is a list. So I have to do toList again. So if you were doing this every frame, yeah, it's a lot of toLists. Right, so I've got my potion items, nothing there, reset, reset, and it doesn't work. Why? It's because I probably didn't set this to be a potion. Yep. Okay, good, and then that's rubbish. So get rid of that. We go again. Ah. So that's cool, but I still had to create a function. It's a nice utility function. I'm not like knocking it or anything, but remember how we talked about anonymous functions before? This is when they are good. Yep.
But couldn't you use find all? And
Yes.
then use anonymous function?
Yep.
Oh.
Could. Yep. You can use that too. I mean,
Is that link or is that list function?
I'm not sure. We can take a look afterwards because there are a bunch of other methods that we can pick from. There's a whole library of linky stuff. So let's create an anonymous function. We want to basically take the item, and then we want to do this. So what this is doing is it's like this is the parameter list, then this is the operation. You can also write it another way, where you just create brackets. I think you're right. Yep. So this is useful, say, if I wanted to do bool results and I wanted to write it over multiple lines.
You don't strictly need the parameter list to have parentheses either when it's only the one parameter. Just an item.
Yeah.
That's just
No, it's fine. It's a good point. It's a good point. It's unnecessary. It's just maybe not that clear to people what's happening. So. But going back to what you said earlier, that there are a bunch of methods. Indeed, there are. So we have a find method that takes a predicate, and that just finds a single item. So that would be useful if we were going to find one. And you also mentioned find all, which returns a list, so we wouldn't need to cast. So that would mean that we didn't have to have this toList method here. So that's pretty nice. That's very succinct, and it's much better than a for loop. So, oh, damn keyboard. So I'll just save them down there. Okay, so has anyone used this before? Perhaps this man, this man. Yep.
Which one? Find all or where?
Well, just any of the link sort methods. Nope. So this is pretty cool. I mean, it's quite declarative. This is something that we've used a lot with our game designers. So we have basically all of these methods are pre-run and cached, and they define like the game state. So like, is the player in the kitchen? It's like true or false. Is the player's child hungry? True or false. So we just pre-cache all of these, and then it makes the queries a little bit faster. I think as well, the Bungie AI programmers, they use declarative languages to basically makes it easier for them to understand, like a tree of expressions of like what's happening. So they actually kind of bunch it up into local areas and share the local information with the entire squad. So like if you have a bunch of the little aliens going around with the big aliens, they're like looking for the player. They're sharing like a little kind of like a collection of game facts about the local area. So that's one way to make this a bit cheaper if you're running queries. But this doesn't really work if you want to make it asynchronous. It's still synchronous. We've done that. So this made me look into other methods. So I was particularly interested in reactive programming, because I know some people who work a lot in the UI JavaScript space, and they talk about it like, oh, it's this new fancy thing. So we don't have that. Mono is very far in the past for Unity. But there are some people that have gone to the trouble of trying to replicate the functionality of this language set in Unity. And it's a wonderful thing because reactive programming is basically processing event streams. So if you go back to Python coroutines, this is like a sequential stream of I want these two things to fire, but they can happen out of order. So that server might be further away than that. Maybe it's like busy or whatever. So you don't know which way these are going to return, but you want to basically kind of go, I want to stop and wait until this happens. So reactive programming is all about reacting to a number of things that can happen, but they can happen out of sync. I didn't really want to copy and paste information from the slides, because I just thought, like, go learn, this is great, go download it, go play with it. So this is the actual library. And here you're doing lots of cool things like input, for instance. So this is really useful if the player is doing stuff with input. Like you get the pointer information, and then they're just spinning it around, and you're kind of going, is that a gesture? Like, does that match that particular gesture? How often did they tap on here? And you can, it has an interface where you can subscribe to certain event sequences. So if something happens in a particular order, something will react to that. If it behaves in a different way, something else will react to it. So I think this has more potential than just web programming. Another reason why this is useful, and another problem with coroutines, is when you can think of asynchronous tasks as a promise. So like you're saying, like, go get me this data from the website. Once the user performs this action, I want you to do this. But what if the user doesn't do that action? What if they don't do that thing? And then your code is just waiting forever. It's like you want to have a fallout condition. You want to know when the promise is broken. And this is something that we looked at implementations for, because it was important that the child remember what you chose and it affected him in a honest way, so we weren't faking it. So the kid would be like, oh, can we play later, or can we have this food soon? And you weren't sure if you were going to go and cook this food for him like the day after next, in 2 days, in 3 days. Didn't really matter. And just leaving that to the game designer, it's like, well, you have variables, you take care of it. It's just kind of inviting bugs, for instance. So I started looking into event streams, and another library that I found was the Promises JavaScript API. So here, this is a kind of linky sort of syntax, because when you have collections and say you want to sort a bunch of items, say this wasn't just doing these tasks, this was saying I have a list of items and then I want to find all the potions, dots, all the potions that are health potions, dots, all the potions that are health potions over my current level, because the ones under my current level I don't care about, they're not important. And so you can chain them together. And this is a very JavaScripty sort of style. If you've done JavaScript, you just have all of the functions chained. And you've probably seen people do this, and when it fails, it's like, it just breaks. So you want to be able to handle errors well. So if you're using link, it always makes sense if you can take a null collection or a zero collection and handle that well. So that's a good thing to do if you're creating your own methods where you're removing items. Promises, these do have fallout catches when things fail or you get an error, and they can actually be handled. So I thought that was very nice. I saw that this chap had gone to the trouble of trying to port promises to C#. So let's find a good. So here again, it's very web focused, but I like this. Download from here, and then he's chaining a then, and then afterwards you've got a catch. So I thought that was a very succinct and nicely way to put it. Here he's got chaining operators. So this is a lot better than passing callbacks in Unity to coroutine methods and then doing lots of if-elses and then having no try catches. It's just very hard for you to see all the permutations. There's more terminology. I think this gets a little bit blurred because you're going between many different languages here. So it kind of reminds me of where you've got events, signals, messages. You know, they're kind of the same thing. They're solving the same problem, but the terminology is a little bit different. So here I would define a promise or present is another way it's put, is an operation that a program expects to be completed, and then the future is the task that runs in the future. Microsoft talks about it here, but this is the very JavaScript-y version. So you have deferrals. Personally, I find it's kind of hard to move between many different programming domains and disciplines and to try and keep up in all of them. But it is occasionally useful to just kind of see what other people are doing, because the paradigms do evolve and they can be applied in your language. So here he's basically caching the responses of queries, and you're doing that in terms of web. But like in AI, you would do it based on what are the AI agents doing? Like, are they running over to get that item? Did they manage to get that item? Did they fail? If they failed, do you want them to get more stressed out? That they're like, no, I must find health soon, otherwise the zombies are going to eat me, I'm scared. I'm running low on ammo. So it definitely does help with game management if you can encapsulate that complexity. So, any thoughts or questions? About link or handling complex events? Nope. Does anyone want to look at UI some more? Does anyone have any questions about Unity's UI? Yeah.
Just wondering if you have used the libraries yourself and what you the promise and the other.
I actually bailed out of implementing promises for Lebensborn because we didn't really have the time at that point, because we were quite far behind calendar schedule. Like, we kept on putting production off. So in the end, we just decided to don't make the game complex. So we were just like saying, you can do these 2 things, but you can't do 5 potential things. So we had to basically cut features, which made me a bit sad. But at the same time, you know, it's good to have limits on your scope. Like, when you start, you think like, it's going to be great, it's going to be impressive from a code implementation perspective, it's going to be way better than Telltale games. And then people in your team was like, we do need to finish. Could you just do a boring implementation and not do anything cool? Like, okay. But the Unity reactive extensions, that is something I'm using, because building on from Lebensborn on our other games, we do want to do things like regionalized quests, for instance. So like a Pokemon Go-ish game where you have quests in your local area and you're getting information from the local regions, and those quests have been changed and updated, so you want to see what are other people doing, what am I doing, and then respond to that. And the easiest way to configure those quests is to work in more declarative terms. So like, is there a troll close? Yeah, like, is he hungry? Like, is the troll large? If so, maybe the villagers will be afraid of the troll. If he's a small troll, you know, they probably don't care. So it's useful for world building and stuff like that. Okay, if we're done, oh no, got it back.
So I was wondering if this here was like an inventory screen, which is the inventory screen, which is opened by, like, say, escape or stopping the game or something.
Yeah.
What's the best way of either stopping the game or having it so that the keyboard inputs and such are sent to the menu instead of the game?
Right. what you can do is there's this little raycast target toggle here that's always toggled on. What you can do, say, on the background is if that's a raycast target and I click, that's going to intercept the raycasts. If you're directly polling the input, say from Unity's input class, and saying like input is key down, is arrow down, that's still going to receive input. So, I mean, you'd have to put in a check there into the input class to say like, am I active and playing the game right now? Other people, if they want to pause the game, they just set they set this game speed to 0, so delta time stops updating. Yeah.
So that's a good method. It's not sort of breaking anything.
Setting the delta time to 0.
Yeah.
I mean, the code is still running, so it's a little bit wasteful. I think it could potentially cause a problem, say, if you have a delayed execution of something. So if an event has procced and then it's going to fire a few seconds into the future, and then you have things listening to that event, even though the game's paused, the event's going to fire, and then a character's going to be like, oh, and there's going to be a sound that plays, for instance. So it is good if you have some manager somewhere that basically tells people like the game is paused, and then all your AI logic won't run. That's generally how I do it. Right, I think we're wrapping up. I do want to quickly show you something else, which is a canvas group, because what you can do here is anything under this game object is in its own group, and then you can change the alpha. You can change whether it's interactable and whether it blocks raycasts. So that can be good if you have, say you want to click on the item and then you want a menu to come up which has details of the item, and you want the menu behind to be there, but you don't want to be able to interact with it. So being able to group things up just gives you an easy way to control what menu is active. Okay, right, thanks everybody.